The weather forecast this morning was absolutely spot on. It's pouring with rain at the moment, and it's been doing that since about 7 a.m. and is forecast to continue for several more hours. Well, the rain this morning certainly didn't prevent Jen from going for a run. I've had a regular gripe this week, so much so that Jen thinks I'm beginning to sound like a stuck record. The problem is this, that the weather forecasting over the last few days really has been a little way off. I've postponed a couple of small events on the basis that there was a very high chance of rain. What happened instead was that we had white fluffy clouds, blue skies and sunshine. A little frustrating. Now, the thing about forecasting is that it's a complex process. Now, we all know that the weather patterns around Britain are notoriously complex, which is why for Brits it's such an interesting subject. Nevertheless, we generally believe that with more data, better models and more powerful computers, the weather forecasts will become more and more accurate. Now, hypothetically, forecasting the future development of COVID-19 could be similar. The problem, though, is a lack of data. We really don't know how COVID-19 will respond as we approach the colder and damper weather of autumn and winter. We could assume, for example, that COVID-19 will behave like other coronaviruses, namely cold and flu viruses, which thrive in the cold, wet conditions of an English winter. And that would make a resurgence of the pandemic more likely. But that is an unproven assumption. Now, the Bible reveals another kind of looking into the future, which isn't forecasting based on scientific modelling. One of the things that's emphasised throughout the New Testament is the way that Jesus fulfilled what was prophesied in the Old Testament. These prophecies were made several hundred years before, and the basis of them, not being scientific modelling, was revelation from God. As with forecasting, you only really know whether a prophecy is true when it comes to pass. That is what verifies the claim that what a prophet has spoken is indeed the word of God. For example, compare Psalm 22 and Isaiah 53 with Jesus' crucifixion in the Gospels. More radically, there's a belief that the gift of prophecy is alive in the 21st century. It's an important gift which I've seen in operation and I've used myself, although I don't claim to be particularly good at it. At its most basic level, the more we align ourselves with Christ, the more we see things from God's perspective. It's a kind of sanctified common sense. But the more radical insights of prophecy come from directly hearing God's voice in some form or another. It may not be an audible voice, it might be a sense or an impression or a picture, but nevertheless it's a revelation from God himself. If these prophecies are fulfilled, then you know it really was God speaking through the prophet in the first place. Now, complaining about weather forecasting is a very British thing to do. It's not often a huge issue whether it's accurate or off by a bit as it has been in the last few days. COVID-19 forecasting is much more serious, but it's also a scientific process. But if we want to know what God is saying to us through the COVID-19 crisis, it's not scientific modelling we need to open our ears to hear God's voice. And that's when we allow ourselves to hear prophetically. And that's scary, exciting and radical.